Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a monumental stack of sources and give you the essential knowledge fast. Today, we're focusing on a figure whose name is, well, it's synonymous with modern mythology. His imagination gave us lightsabers and spaceships and, MIPS. But his true genius, as the sources really show, lies maybe more firmly rooted in the spreadsheets, in intellectual property law, and in the special effects studio. We are, of course, talking about George Walton Lucas Jr.
That's exactly right. I mean, when you start to peel back the layers on this massive body of source material, you realize that just calling him a director or the creator of Star Wars is, well, it's a huge disservice to his actual impact.
It's just not the full picture.
Not at all. This is the pioneer of the modern blockbuster economic model. He's the architect of the franchise as we know it. And maybe most critically, he's a technological disruptor who just completely transformed how Hollywood makes movies.
And what Hollywood thinks is valuable.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this monumental legacy. Our sources cover this full and often contradictory arc. You have his humble California roots as a hot rod racer.
Which is an amazing story in itself.
It is. And then this unexpected pivot into the world of, avant-garde film. Then the founding of these technological empires, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, Skywalker Sound, THX.
And then, of course, the seismic event. The sale of Lucasfilm to Disney.
We're talking about a man who, after that sale, became one of the wealthiest film celebrities in the world. I mean, the net worth is estimated up to, $9.4 billion?
It's a staggering figure.
Yeah.
And our mission in this deep dive is really to get at that tension. We're looking at Lucas not just as a storyteller who, borrowed from Joseph Campbell.
Which he did.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But also as this independent entrepreneur who saw technology and financial control as the ultimate path to creative freedom. We're tracking his evolution from a student obsessed with non-narrative film all the way to a global philanthropist who pledged to donate the majority of that $4 billion Disney sale to charity, specifically to improving education.
It's the ultimate expression of creative independence, isn't it? You build the machine, you sell the machine, and then you use the money to try and change the world.
Let's dive into the earliest influences that shaped this incredible trajectory. We're starting in Modesto, California. George Lucas was born there May 14, 1944. And the sources, they paint a picture of a pretty typical post-war American childhood.
Yeah, but with his really diverse European background, German, Swiss German, English, Scottish, and even some distant Dutch and French in there.
And his early interests, they really show the two sides of what his career would become.
They absolutely do. On one hand, you have the escapist fun, right? The early love for science fiction, just consuming Flash Gordon serials and comics, all the pulp adventure stuff that would directly feed into Star Wars.
But on the other hand, you see this deep fascination with real-world mechanics, with experiential environments. I mean, the fact that he visited Disneyland during its opening week in 1955.
That's a great detail.
It is, because it shows he was just as interested in how things were made as he was in what they were about.
But the thing that really consumed him in high school wasn't movies or space. It was speed. It was race car driving.
Absolutely. That was his entire world. He spent his high school years just dedicated to racing, hanging out at garages.
Driving his own car?
Oh, yeah, his customized, souped-up Auto Bianchi beyond China. He drove it on the underground circuit at fairgrounds. His whole plan was to become a professional racer. He was all in.
And this is where fate, in a truly cinematic turn, intervenes violently, just days before his high school graduation on June 12, 1962.
This event is so pivotal. He was driving, and he got broadsided by another driver. His car, the Beyond China, it flipped multiple times before crashing into an almond tree.
Just a horrific accident.
Near fatal. But here's the profound twist of fate that the sources detail. The seatbelt in his car. It snapped.
It broke.
It snapped, and that ejected him from the car just before it hit the tree.
Wait, so the seatbelt failing is what actually saved his life?
It's exactly what saved his life. That single mechanical failure is what prevented him from being crushed.
Yeah.
I mean, he was still badly injured, bruised lungs, severe internal hemorrhaging, but he survived.
Wow, it's a literal accident that rewrites his entire destiny.
It completely shifted his mindset. He was, 18? Confronting his own mortality. And the sources are clear that this near-death experience just made him lose all interest in racing as a career. He had to find something else. He had to pivot.
So he turns to academia. He starts at Modesto Junior College, studying anthropology, sociology, literature, trying to find some broader human context.
And at the same time, he starts shooting with an 8mm camera, filming the car races he's not in anymore.
And from there, he transfers to the University of Southern California, USC, to the School of Cinematic Arts. But his focus was still pretty far from Hollywood storytelling.
Oh, very far. His influences were the abstract, the non-narrative,
Yeah.
the experimental stuff. He was just soaking up the work of these 16-millimeter underground filmmakers at Canyon Cinema.
But who?
People like Jordan Belson, who did these abstract light studies, Stan Brakhage, who was famous for, like, scratching directly onto the film stock, Bruce Conner, who pioneered this rapid collage editing.
So very high art, very experimental.
Totally. And he was also studying the classics, Godard's Breathless, Fellini's 8½.
This mix of high art, visual experimentation, and, this technical obsession, it seems critical. He wasn't learning how to tell a story in the traditional sense.
No, he was learning the language of light and motion.
Yeah.
And that aesthetic was really codified by his education at USC. He became part of the Dirty Dozen, that legendary group of film students.
Walter Murch was in that group, right?
Yep, Walter Murch, who became an editing genius, John Milius. And he also befriended future titans like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese.
Tell us more about the curriculum, though. The sources really emphasize how conceptual his film education was.
It was revolutionary, really. He was deeply influenced by this course from Lester Novros called Filmic Expression. And it completely threw out traditional narrative.
So what did it focus on?
It focused on the non-narrative elements, the power of color, the rhythm of light, movement, space, time. This was all built on Slavko Vorkavich's theory about the kinetic energy of cinema. Lucas just fell in love with this idea of pure cinema.
That explains so much why he initially called himself a filmmaker, not a director.
Exactly. A director was about actors and drama. A filmmaker was about the technical craft, the cinematography, the editing. He wanted to make films that worked like music or abstract paintings.
It's just so ironic, given that he became the world's greatest granicist.
But the foundation of his craft was always technical. The manipulation of images and sound, not necessarily writing great dialogue. That distinction is key.
And one last detail from this period that just speaks volumes about his path. After graduating in 1967, he tries to join the Air Force.
And gets rejected for the most perfect reason.
Numerous speeding tickets, a perfect echo of his racing past.
And then he gets exempted from the Vietnam draft because of diabetes, the same disease that killed his grandfather. So he was just literally free from any institutional obligations. He could pursue his own experimental vision.
And that pursuit of pure cinema is immediately obvious in his work right after USC. He was creating these abstract visual tone poems.
Right, films designed to evoke emotion purely through non-narrative structures. He was inspired by stuff from the National Film Board of Canada, like 2187. His early films, Look at Life, 1.42.08, they were all non-story, non-character studies.
But the short film Electronic Labyrinth, THX 1138-4EB from 1967, that's the one that really acts as a bridge, isn't it?
That's the critical transition piece. He directed it while he was teaching documentary cinematography to U.S. Navy students, believe it or not.
That's incredible.
And it distilled all his abstract ideas into this dystopian future setting. It's all about editing and sound design, creating an atmosphere. It's a technical exercise first, a story second.
But that technical excellence got him noticed. It won first prize at the National Student Film Festival.
And that landed him a Warner Bros. Scholarship, which is how he ends up on the set of Francis Ford Coppola's film Finian's Rainbow in 1968. And that observation, it quickly blossoms into the defining partnership of his early career.
Because they shared a frustration with the system.
Exactly. In 1969, they co-found American Zoetrope up in the San Francisco Bay Area. This was a deliberate ideological move. It was a countercultural base designed to escape what they saw as the oppressive control of the Hollywood studio system.
They wanted to be able to have final cut.
And just a liberating environment for filmmakers. And their first real attempt at that liberation was the feature-length version of his short, THX 1138.
It showed off his unique visual style, got critical praise.
But it was a financial catastrophe.
Yeah.
An absolute bomb. And the sources show that this failure was maybe more formative for him than any of his later successes.
Why is that?
Because it taught him that even with critical acclaim, Hollywood would try to compromise your vision if they held the purse strings. It just cemented his core belief. Financial independence is the only way to have creative independence.
So right after that failure, he just doubles down on being self-reliant.
Immediately, he creates his own company, Lucasfilm Ltd., founded in 71, incorporated in 77. He realized the only way to escape the studio system was to stop relying on it.
And this leads him directly to his next feature, American Graffiti, in 1973. which is such a pivot away from the abstract dystopia of THX.
A total pivot. It was inspired by his own youth in Modesto in the early 60s. It's purely nostalgic, intensely commercial. A slice of Americana.
The whole narrative is just pure kinetics, isn't it? The movement of the cars, the rhythm of the rock and roll radio.
And it connected with audiences instantly. Huge success. 5 Oscar nominations, including Best Director and Best Picture.
And this is the first major financial turning point for him. He becomes a millionaire at 28 just from this one film.
And crucially, the sources emphasize this. That success gave him the exact financial leverage he needed to propose a project so bizarre, so unproven, that no studio would touch it otherwise.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
The birth of it as a concept, it started with him wanting to adapt the old Flash Gordon serials, a childhood favorite.
Right, but he couldn't get the rights, so he was forced to create his own original space adventure.
And that originality was built on some deep cultural foundation.
Oh, absolutely. It was heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa's samurai films. I mean, The Hidden Fortress from 1958. You can trace the lineage of R2-D2 and C-3PO directly back to Kurosawa's 2 bickering peasants in that film.
He also pulled from spaghetti westerns, right?
Totally. The wandering heroes, the morally ambiguous frontier justice, and then just classic sword and sorcery fantasy. It was a mashup of everything he loved.
But the sources are clear. This was a radical project for Hollywood in the mid-70s.
Radical is an understatement. Every single studio but one turned him down. The only person who forced it through was Alan Ladd Jr. at 20th Century Fox, who backed him on American Graffiti.
There's just no studio belief in it.
Zero. The production was a disaster, technical failures, budget out of control. It was just a mess.
And then the success was immediate, unexpected, and just seismic. It became the highest-grossing film of its time, and it literally saved Fox from financial ruin.
But you can't gloss over the personal cost of that. The production and post-production were so intense that Lucas, who was only in his early 30s, suffered from hypertension and severe exhaustion. He initially thought he was having a heart attack.
Wow.
And the sources note that this immense professional strain contributed significantly to the stress in his personal life, leading up to his divorce from his first wife, Marcia Lucas, in 1983. The foundation of the empire was laid in creative and personal stress.
And here is where the narrative shifts completely. Lucas, the filmmaker, scarred by the financial failure of THX and the personal strain of Star Wars, he transforms into Lucas the mogul.
He does. Before filming Star Wars, he's offered $150,000 to write and direct. His advisors tell him, hold out for more money, get a bigger piece of the box office. He says no.
And he makes what is arguably the single smartest business decision in the history of cinema.
The key negotiation. Instead of a bigger fee, he negotiates for ownership of 2 revenue streams that the studio, 20th Century Fox, thought were basically worthless.
Licensing and merchandising rights.
Exactly, which included toys, clothing, novelizations, and crucially, ownership of the sequels.
The sources explain that Fox's financial team, they were just focused on ticket sales. They happily gave up those rights because back in 1977, toy sales were considered a tiny, tiny revenue stream.
They thought he was a fool. They thought he was giving up guaranteed money for a gamble on some plastic junk.
And that gamble, it pays off exponentially. It basically defines the economic model for the modern blockbuster.
I mean, Lucasfilm has earned hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars just from licensed games, toys, and collectibles. And that stream of income gave him an operational budget completely independent of the studio system.
Which means he alone decided what films got made and how. It was creative independence on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
And the first thing he did with that independence was build his own self-sustaining ecosystem of companies to ensure he would never, ever have to rely on a studio's technical capabilities again.
Let's delve into this Lucasfilm ecosystem. First and foremost, you have to talk about Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, founded in 1975.
And this was born out of pure necessity. The in-house effects department at 20th Century Fox was non-functional. It was useless for what Star Wars needed.
So he just built his own effects house from the ground up.
Yes. He gathered this small, dedicated team of engineers and artists, John Dykstra, Dennis Murin, Joe Johnston, and put them in a warehouse in Van Nuys.
And he named it after the light industrial zoning of the area.
Exactly. And ILM's goal was simple. Create effects that had never been seen before. And their big invention, the Dykstra Flex, was revolutionary.
What was the Dykstra Flex and why was it such a huge deal?
It was a computer-controlled motion control camera system Before this, trying to repeat a camera move perfectly was almost impossible.
Yep.
You couldn't layer effects shots convincingly.
Right.
The Dijksterflex let you execute the exact same camera move hundreds of times, perfectly. So you could layer spaceships, lasers, stars, all onto one piece of film with digital precision. It just shattered the old limitations.
And ILM immediately became the global leader.
Instantly. And the financial benefit was staggering. The sources note that ILM made money from almost every big-budget special effects film released in the U.S. from the late 80s until the Disney sale. He built the operating system for movie magic and then charged everyone to use it.
And alongside ILM, he builds up the sound division, Skywalker Sound, and this audio standardization company, THX, in 1983.
And THX, which stands for Tomlinson-Holman's Experiment, was basically a quality assurance program. Lucas was sick of creating these pristine soundscapes for his films.
Only to have them butchered by bad movie theater speakers?
Yeah, exactly. Poorly maintained, incorrectly calibrated. So THX certified theaters based on strict standards for sound, acoustics, and even image quality. He was demanding technical perfection from the exhibitors.
He really did build a fortress where he controlled every aspect of production, post-production, and even how it was shown.
And this incredible technological ambition also sort of accidentally birthed Pixar.
Right. It started in 1979 as the Graphics Group, one part of Lucasfilm's computer division. They were doing pioneering computer graphics research.
They made early digital films like The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, and they did effects for movies like Star Trek II and Young Sherlock Holmes.
That sounds like an incredibly powerful asset. So why did he sell it? Why let go of what would become the world's leading animation studio?
It was a purely rational business decision. The sources are very clear about this. Steve Jobs bought it in '86 for $5 million, plus another $5 million in capital, right after he left Apple.
And Lucas sold it because
Because it was a cash drain. These high-level research projects had been losing money for 7 years. Lucas wanted to refocus Lucasfilm on creating entertainment, the profitable IP, not developing tools for the industry.
That makes perfect sense from a business perspective. Divest the R&D arm, focus on the blockbusters.
But this period wasn't all just upward financial success. Maintaining this independence required some ruthless business decisions. In 1980, even after the success of Star Wars, Lucas fired his manager and laid off half of the LA staff.
Half the staff. That
Yeah.
seems brutal for a company that's all about creative freedom.
He was fighting corporate bloat. The company had grown to almost 100 employees, and costs were skyrocketing. His manager had suggested some financially risky moves, like selling off parts of Skywalker Ranch to invest elsewhere.
And Lucas's response was decisive.
He cut the staff immediately to maintain focus and protect the core assets. It was a clear statement. Independence means a lean, controlled operation.
And this financial vigilance continued. By 1983, he's worth around $60 million, but he's facing cash flow problems.
Right, because of his divorce settlement, which happened to coincide with a sudden drop-off in Star Wars revenues after Return of the Jedi's theatrical run ended.
So he wasn't suddenly poor, but he was facing liquidity issues.
And that period of financial strain is absolutely crucial context for understanding why he decided to take a long hiatus from directing features.
So from about 1977 all the way through 1993, Lucas basically steps away from the director's chair. He's the CEO, the idea man, the architect, but he lets other people do the actual filming.
He was protecting his health and maximizing his resources. He produced and co-wrote the original Star Wars sequels, but he very consciously commissioned other directors to shoulder the physical burden. Irvin Kershner for Empire.
And Richard Marcon for Jedi.
Ex-
And during this time, he also cements another huge creative partnership born out of those USC friendships, the Indiana Jones franchise with Steven Spielberg.
A phenomenal success.
Yeah.
Lucas created, produced, and co-wrote the stories for the first 4 films, and Spielberg directed. It was just a perfect marriage of Lucas's pulp storytelling instincts and Spielberg's incredible directorial mastery.
His production portfolio from this era is so wide-ranging. He executive produced Akira Kurosawa's Kagemusha.
Which is incredible, helping a master like that. He also did Jim Henson's Labyrinth, Ron Howard's Willow, and that really ambitious educational TV show, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
But even with all that success, the sources point out that he had some big misses.
Oh yeah, he produced the biggest flop of his career during this time, Howard the Duck.
Ah, right.
It was a good reminder that even high-tech special effects mastery doesn't guarantee a hit if the story isn't there.
Speaking of foundations, we have to talk about the secret sauce of his collaboration, the music of John Williams. The sources suggest a really interesting moment of artistic disagreement here.
It's so ironic, isn't it? Lucas, the champion of high-tech futurism, initially wanted to do what Kubrick did with 2001, use pre-existing classical music for Star Wars.
He wanted it to feel abstract and alien.
And Williams convinced him to go the opposite way. He argued that the film's mythical themes needed classical leitmotifs, recurring themes, inspired by composers like Holst and Walton, to ground the emotion.
He said the technology should look futuristic, but the emotions should be timeless.
Exactly, rooted in an operatic structure. And the result was, well, the score for Star Wars won an Oscar, named the greatest film score of all time by the AFI. Lucas himself called Williams the secret sauce of his movies.
It shows his ability to recognize when someone else's vision could elevate his own. But the big question is, after 2 decades of producing, what drove him back to directing for the prequels?
Well, there were a few key drivers, according to the sources. First, there was a real financial reason. His 1987 divorce settlement had taken a big bite out of his fortune, so returning to his most valuable IP made sense.
And second, he was just creatively tempted by the new technology.
Totally. He was tantalized by the possibilities of CGI that ILM was now developing. He saw a chance to make films that could only exist through digital manipulation. It was a way to finally achieve that pure cinema he was always chasing.
And of course, the fan base was ravenous for new material thanks to the novels and comics.
So in 1993, he started writing. He shifted the idea from being some tangential history to being the beginning of one long saga, starting with Anakin Skywalker's childhood. And he stepped back into the director's chair for The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith.
But the sources also point to a hugely controversial part of this period, his insistence on modifying the original films.
This is the tension at the heart of his legacy. In 1997, he re-released the original trilogy as special editions, using digital tech to bring them closer to his original vision.
Adding new scenes, replacing practical effects.
Changing sound designs, and he did it again in 2004 for the DVD release, and again in 2011 for the Blu-ray.
But this was met with massive pushback from fans, wasn't it? People felt he was disrespecting the original films, the history.
Huge pushback. And the sources reflect this conflict. Lucas's position was that since he owned the negative, he had the right and the obligation to make the film match the technology he wished he'd had in 1977.
But fans and critics argued that the films were historical documents. They'd been released, won awards, become part of the culture.
Right. But Lucas's response, enabled by his complete financial independence, was simple. I can do it because I don't need anyone's approval. He owned the IP, the tools, the rights. He saw himself as a continuously working artist. The audience saw the films as finished products.
And that pursuit of his original vision is a hallmark of his independent spirit. And while the prequels were, huge box office successes,
And popular with a whole new generation of younger fans.
the critical and older fan reception was very mixed.
You put it mildly. And Lucas himself reflected on it in 2004. He said his transition from independent to corporate filmmaker sort of mirrored Darth Vader's story in some ways, a necessary path to achieve ultimate control, even if it had its darker side. But he was ultimately glad he could make the films the way he wanted.
So, after finishing the prequel trilogy in 2005, Lucas seems ready to slow down. In 2012, he announces he's retiring from big, blockbuster films.
Yeah, he said he wanted to refocus on smaller, independently budgeted features. He directed some reshoots for the war film Red Tails and wrote a CGI musical called Strange Magic.
But these smaller projects were completely overshadowed by the biggest business announcement of his career.
The Lucasfilm sale, October 2012. Monumental. A true inflection point in modern entertainment history. He sold the entire ecosystem, ILM, Skywalker Sound, everything, to the Walt Disney Company for $4.05 billion.
In cash and stock, the scale of that is just hard to comprehend, and the succession plan was critical.
It was smooth, but very significant. Kathleen Kennedy, who had worked closely with Spielberg and Lucas on the Indiana Jones films, was appointed co-chair and then became the sole leader of Lucasfilm. He was entrusting his life's work to a veteran he trusted.
And the financial result for Lucas was immediate. He became Disney's second largest single shareholder. The only person ahead of him was the estate of Steve Jobs.
Which is such a remarkable loop in the story, isn't it? Jobs having bought Pixar from him all those years earlier.
But what's really moving, according to the sources, is the immediate loss of creative control over the property he literally invented.
He did serve as a creative consultant for The Force Awakens, but mostly on technical stuff, providing guidance on the physics of the universe. He'd say things like, the cars don't have wheels, they fly with anti-gravity. He was providing the rule book.
But the story he had developed for the sequels.
It was jettisoned. Lucas stated very clearly that Disney just tossed out the story treatments he developed for episodes 7 through 9. They chose to pursue a retro story that felt more like the original trilogy.
And this led to some of his most famous and most emotionally charged public comments.
He likened the sale to a divorce, the painful act of letting go of his children. He publicly criticized The Force Awakens for its retro feel, saying it went against his own career-long effort to make each of his films completely different from what came before.
The sources mention his remarks got so heated he actually had to apologize.
He did. In one interview, he remarked that Disney was like white slavers, implying they bought his children, his characters, and were now manipulating them for profit in a way he couldn't control.
Wow.
He quickly apologized, acknowledged it was a poor choice of words, but the emotional core of that statement was clear. He felt alienated from the creation he had spent decades protecting through his independence.
It just speaks to the enormous emotional investment. He built this entire fortress so he could never be creatively compromised, and the moment he sells it, that compromise happens instantly.
Exactly. The sale was the ultimate financial victory, but it meant the end of his singular creative control. His later assessments did soften, though.
Right, he reportedly liked Rogue One more than The Force Awakens.
Yeah, he thought it was more daring. And he described The Last Jedi as beautifully made. He had some cursory involvement with Solo and The Mandalorian, but the reality is the sale marked the end of an era.
The end of George Lucas as the independent auteur mogul. But the wealth from that sale became the foundation for his final act, his non-cinematic legacy. Let's turn to that final act, The Philanthropist. With a net worth close to $9.4 billion, he's the wealthiest film celebrity in the world. But he has also pledged to give away the majority of it through the Giving Pledge,
joining Bill Gates and Warren Buffett in that commitment. And he activated that pledge immediately after the Disney sale. He said he intended to donate the majority of the $4 billion to philanthropy, with a very explicit focus on improving education.
His primary vehicle for this is the George Lucas Educational Foundation, which he founded way back in 1991, operating as Edutopia.
And his dedication goes beyond just funding. It goes to policy. He was one of the leading proponents of the federal E-rate program, which was part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996.
For listeners who don't know, E-rate provides subsidies to help schools and libraries get affordable internet access.
Exactly. He took his expertise in building digital infrastructure, like with ILM and THX, and he applied that same philosophy directly to educational infrastructure. He sees broadband access in schools as being as important as textbooks.
His institutional donations confirm that. He gave, $175 million to his alma mater, USC, to expand the film school?
The largest single gift in USC's history, and the largest ever to a film school anywhere. And it led to the George Lucas Instructional Building and the Marcia Lucas Post-Production Building, which is a really remarkable nod to his first wife's critical role in his career.
Beyond education, his other huge focus is the arts, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art.
The LMNA. Plans for this started in 2013 to display his vast collection of illustrations, concept art, and visual storytelling.
And the project itself has been an epic saga, hasn't it? Just trying to find a location for it.
It's been a logistical thriller. He offered to pay the entire construction cost, initially $300 million, and endow it with $400 million, which he later increased to $800 million. It's a gift worth well over $1 billion to the public.
But the locations were a nightmare. It was first planned for San Francisco.
But that fell through. Then he shifted to Chicago, where they approved a lakefront site. But he abandoned those plans because of a persistent lawsuit from a local preservation group called Friends of the Parks.
Why would a lawsuit from a local group force a billionaire to abandon a billion-dollar project?
Because the law was on their side. They argued the lakefront was protected by the state's public trust doctrine, which reserves it for public use. And Lucas, always wanting to avoid long, draining legal battles, just decided to pull the project rather than fight for years in court.
And he finally settled on Exposition Park in Los Angeles. It's set to be completed in 2026.
And the diversity of the collection is what's so remarkable. It underlines that narrative art focus. You have original Iron Man comic drawings, Indiana Jones concept art, Norman Rockwell paintings, Frida Kahlo, Peanuts sketches.
It's an attempt to elevate visual storytelling from pulp to high art.
Mirroring his own career path, exactly.
Finally, let's just briefly connect his personal philosophy back to all this. We know he was married to film editor Marcia Lou Griffin, an Oscar winner for editing Star Wars. They adopted 3 children, He later married Melody Hobson, with whom he has a daughter.
And his spiritual life is intrinsic to his storytelling. He was raised Methodist, but the mythological structures in Star Wars were heavily inspired by Joseph Campbell's writings, like The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Which is where the Force comes from.
Well, from that and from incorporating Eastern religious philosophies, he identifies his own religion now as Buddhist Methodist.
And his passion for traditional art is clear in his collecting, especially his major collection of Norman Rockwell, which he co-owns with Spielberg. So what does this all mean? We've covered this fundamental duality of George Lucas, the avant-garde artist obsessed with pure cinema in the 60s, who simultaneously became the architect of the modern franchise and the most financially savvy filmmaker of his generation.
And the core takeaway from all this material is that the entrepreneur and the technologist were never separate from the filmmaker. They were always in service of the artist's independence. That masterful merchandising deal was his ultimate creative insurance policy.
That cash flow meant that when he wanted to do something controversial, like the special editions, or an expensive passion project like the prequels, or even build and endow his own museum,
He never had to ask permission. He made that conscious transition from traditional storytelling to prioritizing technical and financial infrastructure. He saw technology as the key to securing his creative freedom.
while he's globally celebrated for creating the galaxy far, far away, the source material really suggests his greater lasting impact might be that technological infrastructure, ILM, which revolutionized effects for everyone, and the massive educational foundations he funded with the sale.
It does.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, as you reflect on all this. We know the power of myth shaped the original Star Wars, defining a generation's understanding of heroism. But given his $4 billion investment in the George Lucas Educational Foundation and the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, is George Lucas's ultimate legacy less about how he told his own stories and more about how he used immense, independently generated wealth to invest in our future stories and education? Think about that generational investment.